When I was 16, I used to attend English classes that were destined for people of all ages. So I was using to having colleagues older than me that also wanted to improve their language skills. I was the usual nice girl. I always felt like I had to be polite and friendly to everyone, even if I got a bad vibe from the person. But I was only really close to another girl my age back then, Jasmine. She was much more popular than me, so she would always introduce me to new people. One day, I noticed this new guy in her group. He was 32 and very talkative, always smiling. For some reason though, he made me uncomfortable from the get-go. I think it's because he would stare at me for no apparent reason, while everyone was talking as a group. He seemed to address me specifically every time, but I didn't give it much thought. As the days passed, I started waiting around before my classroom door and start conversations about my friendship with Jasmine, my high school, my family, etc. I thought it was weird that he was so interested, given that he was much older. My brother was around his age, and he never showed any interest in the lives of my friends, for example. But I felt guilty for feeling bad, like he was just being nice and I was being mean to think he was weird. I should have listened to my instinct. Instead, I forced myself to answer, to make small talk. He told me how close he was with Jasmine, and that made me feel a bit safer. While I asked about him though, she said she didn't know him that well, but that he seemed nice enough. One day I got a call from a strange number. When I picked it up, it was him. He said he got my number from Jasmine. I was upset and confronted her about giving my number to him, and she said he insisted, so she ended up agreeing to it. He started calling me all the time, like 2 to 3 times a day, to ask about my day, saying he missed me and wanted to chat. He started telling me private stuff about his life, because he felt like he could talk to me since I was so mature for my age. I didn't like it, so I stopped answering. I would make an excuse and quickly hang up. Then he would send me messages. That's when things started getting worse. The messages would vary in tone. Sometimes they were really childish, with lots of emojis. He would wish me a lovely day or say he was thinking of me. Other times he would simply say, "You're so pretty, too pretty," with no context. He would say he was glad I didn't have a boyfriend, that I should never get one, or he would be mad. I never answered to those and showed them to Jasmine. I told her I didn't want to see or talk to him anymore before or after class, and she said she would help. I started going to class late so I wouldn't meet him in the corridors and leave class immediately after the end. I saw him watching me. I could feel he knew what I was doing, but I actually sort of enjoyed it. I felt like it was a game to him, making me uncomfortable. He stopped talking to Jasmine and everyone else, but continued to message me saying, "I miss you," or "Why are you so busy?" I blocked his number. I thought that would be the end of it, and started relaxing a bit. But one day, as I was talking to another girl outside the school, he showed up, with a big smile, and said, "It's been too long, why aren't you answering his messages?" He acted like he was worried about me, that I was studying too much, etc. He invited me to go have coffee with him in his house. I told him no, and went inside, where I pretended to study in the library until he left. He waited around doing nothing for more than an hour. I started really being scared then. Since that day, he invited me to his house. He became more aggressive, making fun of me whenever we bumped into each other in the corridor, saying stuff like, "Still busy?" or "I'm in no hurry." He found my social media and sent me messages there, each time more explicit. He would comment on my pictures saying I was sexy, and that he knew that I was up to teasing him. I blocked him everywhere, but I always felt like he was watching me all the time. He stopped talking to me, but would always stare at me in class. One day, I was going back home alone after class. I noticed a car that was right next to me, driving slowly, and when I looked, it was him. He talked to me through the window and invited me in, said he would give me a ride home. It was a residential street, not many people around. I said no, and continued walking. He kept insisting and saying he knew where I lived, he could drop me there. I started walking fast, and stopped interacting with him at all. I just wanted to get to the main road so there would be more people around. He got angry then, said "get in a voice I almost didn't recognize. I looked at him, in shock, and his facial expression had changed completely. He had a dark look in those eyes. No smile at all. He looked like he wanted to hurt me. So I ran and got into the first shop I saw, a mini market. I waited until his car left and sped home. After that, I didn't want to go back to class. I asked my mum to change class. I never told her why. For some reason I felt ashamed, like I somehow caused this situation. I finished the semester without incidents. I know it was all over. But after 2 years, yes, 2 whole years, he came back. By then I was starting uni, and any thoughts of him were out of my mind. Until he created a new account on Facebook and started messaging me again, like nothing had happened, like no time had gone by. He said he was hurt I cut him out from my life, that he wanted to be my friend. I blocked every account he made without ever answering. One day, to my panic, he showed up in my campus. I went to uni close from home, but still, it couldn't have been a coincidence. He was just across the street, watching me. I hurried and got into a bus before he could talk to me. The next week, I wasn't so lucky. I was eating a snack at the cafeteria with a group of friends, and he just suddenly came by and introduced himself to everyone, like we were old friends. I could barely breathe. My friends noticed I wasn't feeling well, and he seemed to enjoy their confusion and my fear. I pulled him aside and asked him what he was doing, asked him to leave me alone. He said he wouldn't, and again that dark look he had in the car years before. Creepiest was just how different it was from the expression he had around everyone else. He looked like a different person. I told him I would tell everyone, and he said he knew I wanted him. He knew I was just a dirty little tease, but that he would get me. My body and mind just shut down when I heard that, and I ran back to my friends and started crying. When I finished telling them everything, he'd gone away, and I never saw him again. I still think about him. I'm 28 years old now, so I don't think he will contact me again. But somehow, I still think he could be not that far away. I don't have Facebook anymore, and don't put photos in my Instagram, because I'm scared that he will see them. I work closing shifts at a grocery store in a bad area of the city. You all hear about the Portland riots? Yeah, my apartment building's door got busted and I ruined my shoes longboarding over broken glass from a truck the other day. We have drills at the grocery store I work for in active shootings and potential lockdowns. We have many regulars who are known for sexual harassment, but there isn't anything anyone does about it until someone steals something. We're understaffed, so it's just me closing at the time. For context, I'm a fairly small person, maybe 5'2", and just hit 100 pounds. I was prepping food for our grab and go when this older man came up to get a sandwich. I didn't know how to work the sandwich bar yet, so I got someone else to help, and after they left, he quietly said, "I came to get you to make me the food, not them." And he left, visibly disappointed. My co-worker who helped them informed me that this guy has just got released from a 20-year sentence in prison for attempting to kill his ex-girlfriend, and then he left again. 30 minutes later, this man came back and ordered the same sandwich, saying, "He just showed you how, so let's get some practice." I couldn't argue there and got to making his food. Here's what really sent shivers down my spine. He turns to me, puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "Good girl," like I was a dog. He's been back nearly daily. If I'm cleaning, he says, "Good girl, good girls clean." If I'm cooking, he says, "Good girls belong in the kitchen." Just the weirdest fucking thing. I've told him I don't respond to that, and asked him politely if he could not make those comments anymore. He didn't stop. He asks when I have my days off, and he walks past my station, often waiting for me to the one that served him or make him food. The creepiest part for me is I've only seen him once after I told one of our security guards, and after one of our people in charge heard him make these comments, and gave me a look like, "What the fuck did this man say to you?" I saw him once, and I could have been overthinking, but I think he looked irritated at me. Didn't stop to get food like he always did. Just stared me down while he passed. A solid 10 seconds of stare down. Two years ago, in winter, I went to the supermarket. Just my usual evening shopping for dinner. It was freezing, grey sky and a lot of rain. I entered the fruit section and saw some stains on the floor which appeared to me like someone broke a juice carton. I just went on with my shopping. I saw some footsteps in the juice but didn't really think about it, and I suddenly felt really ill and dizzy. In the next moment, I walked into an aisle where there was a man lying on the floor, bleeding and holding his stomach. I instinctively realised it wasn't juice, but blood coming from him, and I froze. Didn't know what to do, didn't know how to help. But there were people coming who instantly helped and looked after his wounds, while I finally could move again and called an ambulance. After that, I couldn't really do anything else and continued my shopping, but I felt really weird. Like, what the hell just happened? What did happen to this man? Why was he bleeding? Where's the person who hurt him? I paid and headed back home, and as soon as I got out of the supermarket, I saw a bloody path where the guy must have come from. I couldn't stop looking at the streets and just following wherever he came from. At the end of the street stood a guy, also looking at the bloody footpaths, then looking at me and saying, "This is blood. Wonder what happened?" I answered and explained the situation I just encountered. He looked really intrigued. His eyes lit up and he said with a weird smile, "Probably one of those stabbing incidents that happened in last week's around this area. I've been a detective for quite some time, so I just know it's blood when I see some." I didn't really know what to answer, so I just nodded and wanted to continue my way home, but he went on. "A lot of weird stuff happens in this neighbourhood. I hope it's not related to those rape incidents of the past weeks. Did you hear about it? Always women in their 20s. Again, this weird smile. I'm a woman in my 20s. I shake my head, mumbled something like "that's horrible," and walked home really fast. Now, I don't know if it was just a weird guy or really an old detective, but my gut told me to just go home. How his face lit up and when he heard of the stabbing, and then why would you tell a young woman after such an incident that particularly women in her age get raped around here? I don't want to assume anything, but he left a really, really creepy vibe in my memory. I was involved with a guy who liked to play games, lead me on, and highly enjoyed playing with my emotions. He came in my life like he was a catch. 6'2", very fit and lean, ocean blue eyes, and he was a sweetheart. I didn't even really notice him when I first met him, but he started talking to me, and the more I talked to him, the more I liked him. You know how they say in movies, you find the one you're not looking, and it's usually the person right in front of you that you didn't expect? Yeah, well, that's exactly what happened with him. I did not see him coming. Eventually, we talked every day and night. We also worked together on different shifts, and we would call each other on breaks and the whole "I found the one" feeling. He would come in early just to see me, and I would stay late just to be around him. And after we got off work, we would go back to my place and just talk all night. Sometimes cuddle and kiss, but he never pushed sex. I thought I had the golden ticket. Anyways, things were going amazing until he decided to ghost me randomly. Mind you, we worked together. I'd already fallen in love, and I thought that he had too. Of course, when we talked about it, he said he was starting to, blah blah blah, and that's why he ghosted, because he's afraid of love bullshit spiel. I fell for it, which made matters worse, because I thought if he was falling and we're talking now, maybe we could patch things up and pick up where we left off. We did not, and he continued this charade for a whole year. It really messed me up, and I was pretty heartbroken over it. Anyways, I looked online for advice, downloading the Whisper app and talking to strangers about my problems. I felt more alone than ever during that time, and I was honestly pathetically desperate to not only get over him, but to find love and prove to him that I didn't need him, and I had moved on. A guy with an anonymous name commented on a post I had posted and said his name was Pat. He talked to me for hours about my problems and his problems, and we really started connecting online. We talked for maybe 2 weeks, every day, all day, repeating history as you can see. We traded some pics, and my gosh, this man was very good looking, but not overly good looking. He was that weird kind of handsome that wasn't so hot all the girls were drooling. He was very nice to look at, if that kind of puts it in perspective. I've always been a pretty smart girl when it came to strangers, so I downloaded this fake texting and calling app so I can give my number out without having to worry about being spammed or harassed, because I could just change the number whenever I felt like it. My friends and family had my real phone number. He finally asked me out and asked if we could meet at a steak and shake that was near both of our areas. I agreed, and we set a date. When we got there, I parked and told him I was in a different car than what I was driving. First of all, the fact that I instinctively was lying about my vehicle and everything else should have risen red flags for me. But I ignored my intuition and kept on with the plans. He told me he was in a Toyota, and I immediately spotted the car. It was the only Toyota in the parking lot, and mind you, it was full. When he got out of his car, he was parked a bit away, so I couldn't see his face, but the body matched with the pictures, so I thought, okay, so far so good. I told him I could see him, but for some reason I felt compelled to stay in my car. I don't know why. He was texting me, "Where are you?" and "How do you see me?" and just seemed on edge. So eventually I got out and met him at the door, and let me tell you, this guy was not the guy in the pictures at all. He was a lot more skinny up close. He was wearing a frickin' Marvel t-shirt like he was in high school, and he was not attractive in the slightest bit. Everything in me said turn around and run. I felt bad and thought about how I had fallen for Ocean Eyes, most likely because of his looks, and I didn't want to be that person, so I stayed and had dinner. We actually had good conversations and debates. He was analysing me all night. He pointed out that I opened the door for myself, and sat down by myself, and even told the waiter to partying, etc. I told him yes, I'm a very independent female, and apologised for being so. Anyways, we got onto the topic of rape, and how I believed every child rapist should be put to death, and how other rapists should spend the rest of their lives in jail. He disagreed, and said he thought they should be given a second chance to live their lives and be remorseful for their crimes. I'm all about rehab in jail when you did something like robbery or drugs, but rape? No dude, that should have been my get the fuck out red flag. I was genuinely interested in the debate we were in. He looks at me with this creepy look, and he says, "I'm going to tell you something I don't tell many people, and it needs to stay between us." We're on the topic of rape, and you say that to me? Another get the fuck out red flag, but I stay and tell him it stays between us. I won't say what he told me, because every time I repeat it, I get bad juju vibes. Let's just say it was something like the current Justin Bieber case, but Pat claims he did not go to jail for, and that's why he does not believe people who are accused of rape should suffer. Mind you, I do not believe his story. We have more crazy and heated arguments, debates, the rest of the night, and I realised that I had spent the last 6 hours talking to this guy in a steak and shake. We decide it's time to go and walk to the counter to pay, but we don't want to end the conversation, so we get in my car and drive off in a dark, empty parking lot around the corner. We start talking about this guy I was involved in, and I tell him every little detail of what happened between us, and this dude really proceeds to tell me that he thinks this guy's family is in the KKK, and that's why he wasn't allowed to be with me. There were little details in that story. I brush it off, as whatever, and just stop talking. I was all talked out with this guy. So we switched the conversation to sex and things of that nature, and somehow it turns into him kissing me even though I told him no. But he keeps trying to do it anyways. I was honestly too scared to push him away, so I just played along and was trying to say no in a joking way, hoping he would just give up. But instead, he pressed his lips against mine and would not stop. He then pulled out his uncircumcised thing, which was not small, and told me to touch it. He also calls me by my first and last name, and it freaks me out because I only told him my nickname. He tells me that he saw my credit card, so that's how he knew. Creepy. There were a lot more details with our conversations that were just downright creepy. My friends were texting me, asking for updates and etc., and they didn't know he was an internet guy. I was too embarrassed to tell them, so I told him I met him through someone. We eventually part ways, and I drive around a little just to make sure he wasn't following me. My car was having a little bit of trouble, so he kept offering to drive me home and saying he would come over. I said hell to the no, we can talk in my car. After that night, I never heard from him or saw him again, until I was on a couple different dating apps, and that same guy cute picture was on each one, but with the name Ben, Chris, and Brian. I still think about this encounter as an adult. When I was about 10, I'm 25 now, I was downstairs watching TV late at night with my mom and sisters. Everyone decided to head off to bed, and I was left alone downstairs. I started drifting off, and all of a sudden, someone started banging on our door hard. I'm talking let me the fuck in hard. I was so scared, I just sat there frozen, staring at the door, like my life depended on it. My dog was laying right next to me, and he just stared. He never barked or moved an inch, which was odd because he always barks at the door. The banging never stopped for what felt like a solid 5 minutes, but in reality it was probably only a minute. I looked at my dog, and I think because I finally moved, my dog snapped out of his trance, looked at me for a split second, and jumped up and ran towards the door. He still didn't bark, but instead started turning his head like he was confused. I finally got the courage to get up and open the blinds, to see what was going on, and this young woman, maybe around 20 or 25, was standing there, holding her left breast in her hand. It was still attached to her, but she had pretty large breasts and she was holding it, trying to keep them up from sagging, I'm guessing. She had blonde hair, white skin, and was covered in blood. Her shirt was ripped and her hair was a mess. I remember thinking she may have gotten beat up or was in a car crash. Either way, I immediately went to go open the door. As soon as I went to unlock it, my mom out of nowhere slammed her hand on the door and relocked it. I had no idea she'd even come down the stairs, let alone walked up behind me. I was so focused on the door and on this woman, when she slammed her hand, it was almost as if it knocked me back into reality. Reality of not opening the door to strangers in the middle of the night. I looked up at her, and I could feel my eyes were wide, and I think I even started crying. She put her hand on my shoulder and moved me away from the door. She yelled, "Who is it?" through the door, and the girl yelled back that her boyfriend had beat her up, and they lived in the apartment across the street from us. Mind you, we lived in townhouses in a cul-de-sac. Our unit was all the way in the back, where you would start the turn. We were the first unit on the row, but where she pointed out her and her boyfriend's place was quite a ways from us. You'll see how I know that in a minute. My mum asked her name, and she said something that sounded like something any. Maybe Bethany or Stephanie, or something like that. I saw my mum hesitate to open the door, but after she yelled, "Please help me," my mum opened the door, stepped out, and pulled it closed to shut, but not completely shut. I cracked the door behind her to make sure she was okay, and also see what was going on. The woman, we'll call Bethany, kept thanking my mom and asking to come in because she was scared her boyfriend was going to come after her. My mum refused and explained that she couldn't let her in because of the safety of her 4 kids, but said she could sit out there with her. My mum yelled at me to grab the phone and call the police, so I did. My mum started asking what happened and the specific unit she lived in. She pointed towards her specific one and told my mum the building number in her unit, B. This silver SUV pulled up a little later, and she ran towards it yelling, "That's my sister," and then just jumped in. The car sped off without another word from her or a single word from her sister. My mum looked back at me confused and came back inside and shut the locked door. We just stood there and looked at each other. I asked my mum what about the police, and she said she would wait for them downstairs if I wanted to go to bed. I was too scared to leave her, so I waited with her. Once they arrived, my mum explained what happened, and the officer said she did the right thing not letting her inside. Weird thing is, my dog never barked once, until the cops knocked onto the door. They also explained that they've been receiving similar calls like that in the area recently. Even worse, the next morning we all packed up to go to the grocery store, and as we passed that building, you could tell the apartment was empty. Like no one had been living in it. Maybe they just didn't have any furniture or anything, but it was still weird. He never came after her that night, and we never saw her or the SUV again. Bethany or Stephanie, I hope you're okay, if this was real, but if it's not, don't ever knock on my door again. A long time ago, when I was 6 years old, I'm in my early 40s now, I was kidnapped while walking with my mother and brothers on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, Louisiana. So I have only splintered images as memories of this day, but the way my mother and my granny tell the story, it goes like this. I have 2 older brothers. We are all about a year apart. All four of us are walking along Bourbon Street, and there's a walk area with a large fountain. I recall playing in this fountain with all the other kids because it was Louisiana in the summertime and it was hot as balls. I'm not gonna lie, I was adorable as a kid. I still am, lol. I'm the only ginger in my family, and when I was young, my hair was fire red. Not stupid orange, but that colour red that women all over the world spend billions on every year, trying to get dyed in their hair. I had freckles and was always hopping, and I had an adorable stutter. I'll try to include a picture of my cuteness. Anyway, we were walking along. My older brother Jason was in my mom's arms. He stubbed his toe and he was upset. And myself, clinging onto one hand, and my brother Josh, who was 2 years older than me, was walking directly in front of her. When, these are my mom's words, a tall Creole voodoo type man with long hair walked up beside me and grabbed me and sprinted away. She started yelling, "That man took my baby! That man took my baby!" and was unsure if she should drop my brothers, leaving them vulnerable and exposed to pursue. Lucky for my ginger ass, there was a police officer on a horse within earshot that came trotting up, and my mom yelled at the cop, "That man took my baby!" and pointed him out just as he rounded a corner out of sight. The cop took off after the suspect, and about 2 blocks later, the cop had caught up with me in the arms of this guy, who dropped me, realising he was screwed, and tried to get away in a car that was waiting for him. A car chase ensued with them and the cops. Now, depending on who tells the story, mom or granny, after the chase ended, the suspects fired at police, and the cops ended up killing them. Or they didn't. I'm still unsure. But I was rescued and brought back to my mom unscathed, albeit freaked the fuck out. There was no telling what would have happened to me had the cop not been there on his horse. I may have been sacrificed, voodoo is a thing, or sold on the sex market, or who knows what. Living with my parents and fresh out of high school, I really didn't have a direction I wanted to go. I would tend to come home late most nights. One particular night, I arrived and went to my room, watched some YouTube, and went to bed. I remember my dream real good. That's a rare thing for me. I forget a lot. I was walking down the hall, through the room, when all of a sudden, I'm in bed with my little sister, saying she can't go to sleep. She's scared. I look around, I'm in my brother's room, and I tell my sister to just lay down and go to sleep. I'm saying this to her as I see the closet doors swing open, and from the end of the bed, something grabs my leg, drags me off into the floor where I grapple with this thing. As I fall forward, holding onto this man-like creature all of a sudden, I'm in my bed, sitting up with this thing trying to get it off me, as I can now feel its body. Like when you skin an animal and you can feel its muscle and bones. That's the only way I can describe it. It finally lets go and jumps back from me off my bed into the wall of my room. I sat there in bed, confused and freaked out. I was fighting something in my dream, and I brought it with me as I woke up. The next morning, my father was telling my mom that he had a strange dream where he walked from his room to make sure the house was locked. On his way, he noticed something sleeping in the couch, and that just thought to himself, "Oh, it's my wife's sister's husband." They'd never met before, and he lived in Lafayette, Indianapolis. He goes back to sleep in his dream. As my parents are saying all this, my mom's phone rings. Her sister's husband had killed himself the night before, while my aunts and cousins sat in the living room watching television. I never told my parents about my encounter that night. But I think that night I got into it with the demon that was supposed to take my uncle that night as he came to visit my family. I'm a hospice nurse and had this experience about 10 years ago when I was a fairly newly qualified nurse and had been at the hospice about 6 months. I was on nights, and after handover from the late shift, I set off to check in on all the patients, 12 people, with 4 in small private rooms. The private room patients were the closest to death, bedbound and sleeping for long periods. They had no contact with each other. In the first private room, the old lady asked me, "Was that your dog in here earlier, nurse?" I said no and asked about the dog. She told me it was big and black and like a German shepherd. I told her that it might have been one of the pets' therapy dogs. I knew one of those was a big black greyhound, but it shouldn't have been roaming off lead and, of course, isn't GSD looking. I checked the visitor log and no therapy dogs had been in that day. I put it down to a pain medication and illness, until I went to the second private room and the gentleman said there was a big black dog right by my bed earlier. I could see he was distressed, so I said it must have belonged to one of the visitors and it had gone now. But a shiver went down my spine. The third private room was another lady, very weak but still quite lucid and coherent. Again, I heard about a black dog. I asked if it looked like a GSD. She said it looked like a wolf. I told her that 2 other patients had seen it, and that seemed to reassure her. I told her that I would be looking into why a visitor's dog had been wandering around, but I knew there had been no flesh and blood dog on the unit that day. We lost all 3 of those patients within 24 hours. The first 2 were expected and slipped away peacefully. The third lady wasn't expected to go quite so soon. She had a catastrophic bleed that night. In British folklore, a black dog is often associated with death, and was once seen as a sort of spirit guide that led people to the afterlife. It could, of course, have simply been a coincidence. Morphine makes people trip. Often they see animals. It's very likely that these people had prior knowledge of black dogs as part of English mythology. But still, all 3 seeing the same apparition on the same evening is pretty creepy and fascinating. It's something I still think about a lot to this day.